Hi everyone, welcome to another video. It's quite a special video today. A question I've been asked quite a lot on social media is sort of around injury, and how do you come back from injury and staying focused and motivated. So I thought to help me answer this question, I would get a good friend of mine and a fellow athlete who I've raced with countless times in the Cox's Pair, the Cox's 4 and the Men's 8. And this person's had their fair share of injuries over the last couple of years. And this athlete is Alan Sinclair. Now Alan is up in Scotland where he's based his lockdown, training hard with his family and friends. From memory, Alan, he broke his leg I think about the year we both sort of joined the squad, so sort of the 2012, 2013 year, he broke his leg. And then he had shoulder surgery following the Rio Olympics, so the first year of this Olympiad. And then last year he had both wrists operated up. So I thought it'd be really interesting to hear from Alan, sort of firstly how those injuries were diagnosed, and then in some circumstances making that tough decision of sacrificing the current season to try and be better and stronger for the following season. So, those are tough decisions that you have to make, and hear from Alan himself how he made those decisions, and then once he had the surgery, what it was like during the rehab process, what was going through his mind. Were there any dark days? Was it all positive? How is he staying focused? What was driving him to come back that following year? So without further ado, I've got Alan waiting for us on a Zoom call, and let's jump into it. I think it's going to be really fascinating, and I hope you enjoy. Yeah. So I think basically people always ask about injuries, and more specifically sort of motivation. And most of my injuries have been sort of tendonitis. So I can sort of keep training. And I'm only out for like a week or two. But then obviously with you, broken legs, lots of different surgeries, you're probably a much better person to talk to about that. And I think especially at the times when you've actually had the surgery as well, because sometimes you've sacrificed entire seasons to sort of have the surgery so you come back stronger, I guess, long term for the Olympic Games. So I think quite good if you start at the very beginning, because that was quite a funny photo that you sent me of you and Will, and that was pretty much you just being stupid, wasn't it? When you broke your leg.
Yeah. First, so before, up until that point, up until 2012, I'd not injured anything, apart from one small period where I had tendonitis in my wrist from swapping from sculling to sweep, or maybe swapping from stroke side to bow side. But it was like years before, and it lasted literally like a week. So I didn't have any major injuries, like from birth. I didn't break a leg, didn't break an arm or anything. And so 2012 summer, I did the double scull with John Collins, won Henley, and then it was a period you were in the European squad for the foot side, and I was in the squad in the sculling side due to do the quad. And there was like a winter training block, and they asked us to do the odd cross training session. I think one of the suggestions was to play football. And there's a group of guys, including Ross Hunter and Dan Ritchie was one of them, and I think maybe Ben Duggan. And I played football basically, and initially was running outfield thinking, I'm going to do myself a mischief here. I was quite aware of how I hadn't played football in ages, like years. So I thought I'll stand in goals instead. And ironically, it was the one position I played in at school, because I wasn't very good at football. And but I ended up being quite good in goals because I spent all the time in goals. So when I was playing this game, I was getting a bigger and bigger ego because I was saving more and more shots.
Yeah.
And then to cut a long story short, Dan Ritchie hit the ball. It deflected off someone, but I had already dived to the left as that happened. And mid-dive, I tried to react to the deflection that went further over. And so I pushed it in my left foot, and then it twisted it funny, and basically I didn't realise at the time, but I'd broken my leg in 2 places. So the picture that I've sent you is the day after, because I figured I'd sprain my ankle, and I had tickets to go watch the Olympics, and Will was racing this pair's semi-final. So I managed to I got some crutches overnight from someone to borrow, and then got to the venue, and someone there was like a disability bit where they could get a wheelchair or whatever. And so I got one of those, got pushed around, and I had my foot and ankle wrapped up. I was still wearing shoes, and I was still walking around a little bit. I was still standing.
I saw the photo, and there was no cast. It was just wrap.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know it was broken at that point at all. And so yeah, I watched his race, and then actually was another 2 days. I would just laid up in bed thinking, oh, it's a sprained ankle, and it'll be fine. And I think we had maybe a day or 2 off from training, but I went to watch Will's final, and it was that night that my foot just ballooned up. It was super swollen. It was a cleat in my toes and my foot, and ended up. My dad said to me, we should go to A&E just to check, and put our minds at ease that it's just a sprain. And got there, waited 2-3 hours, and got a scan, an X-ray. And the radiologist generally don't say anything, but this guy popped his head round the corner and said, "Well done, you broke it in 2 places." And oh, great. Oh, what do I do? So initially, they were going to put a plate in my leg because they thought it would be too floaty, the fragment that was in there. But they found out what my job was, essentially what my occupation, even though I wasn't getting paid at the time for rowing, I was coaching. And the doctor said, well, we're worried about risking your mobility by putting a plate in, so we're going to give you a cast and trust that you'll look after it. So I actually had this was the first, like I said, moment of I'm injured, I've hurt myself badly, I'll be out for 6 weeks, at least rowing, and it was probably the most challenging time to that point, in deciding whether I was going to carry on rowing or what I was going to do. And I remember my dad suggesting that I come up here to Inverness and rest for those weeks and then go back down south again. And thankfully I had a very supportive coach that was looking after us in the Europeans quad. And he messaged me and said, I think you should stay and train in the ski erg for the duration and do it as if you are still training for the championships. And then, just take it one step at a time. So I did that, and it was brutal because I was on crutches and I was doing the ski erg, which I'm sure you remember was pretty mind-numbing to hear. The whole building was shaking because it was attached to
the old school one.
Beams, and it was upper body weight, so my arms were just in pieces all the time. I just felt so fatigued, and every single time I had to get up to go to the toilet or get up to make some food or anything, I was in agony. But I do feel like that was the period that gave me structure and how to get through any kind of further challenges, whether it's an injury, whether it's an illness, or whether it's whatever else that came to me. I felt like that 6-week period where I could attack the ski erg and make small challenges to myself to push on, while it was agony, while it was just mind-numbing, it was the best thing that probably could have happened to me for preparing me for the team. So I actually ended up getting dropped and go back to the club, but it was only a little while, and I got a fortunate call up to substitutes into a seat race, like a pairs matrix, and that's I happened to be ready. I happened to be in decent shape. I did okay in that, and that's what got me in the team.
Yeah. Was that on stroke side?
That was in bow side.
Bow side. Because we were in a pair with you on stroke side before that, weren't we?
Yeah. So I remember I came to Caversham as bow side or stroke side and a sculler. And they needed someone who could do all because they had Bill Lucas was injured, I think. Tom Clark was injured and somebody else was ill, maybe on stroke side. So I remember in the first 2 weeks when I came and trained, I did all three.
Yeah.
At some point, and one of those sessions was with you. I remember that. And then I got told, right, bow side for this matrix and see you get on. And
that's something you do right. Is that what you won? You won in the bow seat, and I won in the stroke seat.
Yeah.
I remember that was like our first taste of testing, and that was quite a brutal one. That was the full 2 days. Both stroke and that bow.
Yeah. I remember. Well, I spent the first. Again, this is that block of time where I was training at Caversham. I was able to take the motivation that I'd built up from that 6 week block earlier on in the year, where I'd be on the ski erg, and I remember thinking, right, well, because the choices were that I would, like I say, stay down and train, or call it a day because I missed the 2012 Olympics. I was never going to be good enough to make them. But I always kind of thought maybe if I could make it in 2013, then there would be maybe a chance. So when I got the opportunity to come and train, I took every single session as like, this is going to be my last one. Yeah. So that was every single time pushing off the water, off the pontoon, sorry, and thinking to myself, this might be the day that Christian or Jürgen says, "Oh, thanks for your help, and we'll not be needing you." And as a result of that, I just pulled my nuts off pretty much every day. And that matrix, I remember every single one, just killing myself. And one of the runs, I think the run with Noddy in particular, I think I was at stroke as well. And I think I just went off like an absolute idiot and just to somehow managed to hang on. And I was in absolute pieces. I remember thinking that series of testing was the hardest I'd pushed myself consecutively to date. And and obviously that's what took me into the team. So injury was the reason that I'd strengthened my mentality and learned a new way to train. So as much as it's great to be robust, and I'm very fortunate that I spent the majority of my rowing career injury free, and I've not had kind of ongoing niggles. The injuries have been the things that have shaped a lot of my career as well.
Yeah, because then after that you had your shoulder done, which at the time was probably your biggest thing so far, because I remember you just being out for ages, and that was straight after the Olympics pretty much, wasn't it? The first season of this Olympiad, and that almost took me for most of the season.
That season. There was after the Brit leg break, it was 4 years before anything else had happened. But I do remember what came about. Basically, my shoulder was the labrum had torn. So for anyone that is watching that doesn't know anything about shoulder like I did, it's like a buffer between the joints, the bone, and if it's not in place, it means that the ball kind of slides around and doesn't have a proper fixing. So because it had torn, it meant that my muscles were the things that were holding my shoulder in place. So it meant that it clunks around a lot. It meant that I couldn't do certain angles of pushing in my hands, and it didn't really it wasn't getting to the point where I couldn't row, but it was making rowing harder. Like I couldn't really draw up my outside elbow to the finish. It was just that position didn't exist in my joint, and we knew about it being an issue. Something had been wrong with my shoulder in about 2015, I brought it up, and then I did it again at the start of 2016 season. And the physio said, well, we can go get a scan, but in reality, it's probably not going to be useful, because if we go and find out that you've got something wrong with it, you're not going to get an operation because it's Olympic year. So why would you want to know about something that might cause you problems? So I didn't do anything. But when the new Olympiad started, got booked in, had an MRI scan, and the doctor surgeon straight away said, yeah, it's pretty bad. Like, irrespective of whether you carry on rowing, you'll need to get this fixed for general life, because otherwise you'll have some severe arthritis, and you'll lose function of your arm at some point in the future. So to what extent he didn't really specify. He was, didn't go down that too much, but anyway, he explained the operation. They kind of put these anchor points in, and but they go in through keyhole. But this operation meant that I had what was it? It was like 6 or 8 weeks of being fully restricted, and I was in like a block sling. Mm-hmm. So I'd lock underneath my arm, you can see there. And I think I sent you a picture of me in it. I think it was a day or two after I'd had the operation.
With the mask on.
And the bike with the mask on. And so that was pretty cumbersome. It was obviously very sore. And then there's a long period after that when you can start to use your arm, where you're building up the muscle and kind of the mobility as well. So that was the most lengthy injury I've had, and that was quite tough, because we had to make it wasn't a season ender, because I managed to go to the World Championships, but I had the operation in January after the Sierra Nevada camp, and then it was until I think it was Lucerne Regatta I came out to as a spare. I just rode around the lake in a single, and then went to the Worlds. So I missed out in trials, missed out in all the racing, all the fun stuff early in the season, because I knew that if I was going to have a good chance of making it 4 years to the next Olympics, I needed to have a shoulder that was going to last. Yeah. Because it definitely gotten worse. I never managed to find out what caused the injury in the first place, whether it was something stupid like picking a weight up the wrong way, or whether it was throwing a stone up in Silvretta, or whether it was something years and years before that. But the surgeon said it was definitely a chronic injury that gotten worse over years. So it needed doing, and I'm definitely grateful for having it done, because now it's pretty solid. And but yeah, that was another period where this time I was on the bike. And I spent a lot of the time on the bike with a altitude mask on, a simulator.
Was that the one where someone knocked the tube once? And like no oxygen flow at all?
Who was it? One of the women's team. They just walked past, and basically how it works is it's like a generator which sucks in air, normal air, and reduces the amount of oxygen that it gives to you. So you're breathing in air with a lower percentage, and you can change the settings for that. So I would generally have it set so that I'm working at the equivalent of 2,500 meters. It was so close to about the same as Sierra Nevada.
Yeah.
And I think that Jürgen thought with the idea of it just to make training a bit different and to get more out of the bike. But yeah, somebody walked past and I think went over they knocked the tube that draws air into the machine, and it basically meant that it created a suction when I was breathing in. So I had the mask stuck onto my face, and I couldn't breathe in or breathe out because I had an empty face of empty lung of air, and my eyes went redder, and then someone eventually noticed and then plugged it in, and I managed to pull the mask off with one hand and just like come to a little bit more. But obviously it was a big accident, so it was fine. But yeah, that again it was another challenge and another different, like a variation to what I've experienced before, another opportunity to push myself. And it's quite easy to, I think, the thing I learned over these periods of being injured for a long time was that I could get quite easily disappointed and downbeat about not making linear progressions. It's quite easy to kind of expect to be a little bit faster every single time you go on the bike, or at least every week. You kind of expect to be like, well, I did a half-hour test at 400 watts, and next week I should do 405. And it doesn't work like that. The same way as when you're training on the row machine or the water, you're never going to always get better. But I guess because the only feedback you get is a number in front of you, you expect it to be better, and you're not getting the feedback of, right, well, the boat run is feeling better, or the catches are getting better, or I'm sitting up better, visually it looks better. It's all you've got is a number, so you kind of become reliant on seeing a positive impact on it to give yourself that reward sensation and a feeling of satisfaction that you've done a good job. But as time went on, I've definitely got better at recognizing that if you genuinely feel like you've done some good work and your body feels tired and you've pushed yourself hard, and everyone knows within themselves if they've worked hard, then you should feel satisfied that you've done your best in that given day. And if I'm sure equally some people have had sessions where they felt like they haven't pushed themselves necessarily that hard, but they've had a great session, and I had them as well. There were some days where I smashed out a huge score in the half-hour test in the bike, and I'd be like, I don't even know how I did that. I don't know what I did differently. And I started to think, well, what did I have for breakfast? Or what did I sleep better? You trying to work it back, and most of the time you can't really calculate it. You can't plan for it.
Yeah.
It'll just work. And I guess there's that cliche of trusting the training, trusting the process is applicable for when you're injured, and it's quite crucial to make sure that you don't get into a negative spiral of feeling like you have to make progression every single day.
Yeah,
progression
that's definitely the key. It's just understanding that it's not always linear, and that there is a time where you are going to plateau, and then not overcomplicating it. And when that happens, just like you say, just trusting the process, and just trusting, like, even if you don't get a personal best, like, even if your steady state hasn't progressed, but you've still managed to put down an hour of cardio, that's going to add to the end result, and you're going to come out of sort of that injury zone fitter and stronger, regardless of like not PBing every single week. Because like you say, you're not going to PB on every single test you do, and it's just being okay with that. But I think with that one, it was probably, I mean, it was your longest time on sort of rehab. But then I guess as it was the very first year of the Olympics, you already had that end goal. You were sort of fresh from Rio, and your eyes were set on Tokyo, and so you got it out of the way earlier on. And I guess making the world champs was like an added bonus. But I don't know, but if you hadn't quite made the world champs, but you knew your shoulder was good to go by the following year, that would have been fine. But your most recent injury with your wrists, that was last year. And again, that sort of took you out for an entire season. So that must have been a very different experience to your shoulder, being the Olympic qualification year.
Yeah, it was. And it was much more, I'd say it's probably the most frustrating injury. So to explain my wrist, I had intersection syndrome. So you have several tendons that supply your fingers and allows them to move. And I don't even know why it happened. The surgeon that saw me said it could be, I said to him, I've been rowing since I was 13 years old, and I've never had this before. I've had tendonitis, and it feels completely different. It's just like a chronic ache that really hurt, like to the point where I couldn't open my fingers up or close them.
Yeah,
it was so. And there was initially, obviously, with any injury, we avoid having to get to the point of having intervention surgically. So I had periods of like 2-3 weeks of out the boat on the bike, and then back to try and row again, and 2-3 weeks out again, and that happened like 3 or 4 times at the start of the 2019 season. So the end of the 2018 year, and had injections, and it just didn't seem to get better. Excuse me. And then eventually, the surgeon said, "Look, it looks like intersection syndrome. All the symptoms suggest it is." And at this point, I was just so frustrated with it not getting better. I was like, "Well, I just need to get something done, because I've tried everything. I've rehabbed it. I've iced it. I've done it like religiously to the point where I'm getting kind of burns in my wrist from frequency, not from doing it stupidly, but just doing it a lot, and spending probably way too long on anti-inflammatory medication trying to ease it, and it just wasn't working." So anyway, this surgery, I was told, because it's not particularly invasive. It's there's like a sheath that goes over the top of your tendons, which hold them all in place. So you imagine that like a very nicely formed motorway. Normally, all these tendons go down, and they're organised how they should be. But there's intersection points, and that's usually there, and that's where the friction was happening for me, and that was causing the pain. And so what they do is they take away that little bit of fascia that holds it in place, and it frees up these roads of tendons, and they can go wherever they want now. So I mean, arguably you'd say that it means they can go in the wrong way and they could cause other problems, but ultimately I needed to try and get rid of the pain. So it worked pretty well for my right wrist, and they said it should only be, what was it? It was 2 weeks. 2 weeks in the bike, and then I could start doing stuff with the hand again. And I did, and the other wrist got injected while I had this one operated on. So I got back in the boat and back rowing, but the injection generally lasts about 6 weeks, and I literally lasted 6 weeks to the day, and then my left wrist started hurting the same way the right one did. But the only reason I hadn't got to that point before was because it was my outside hand, and my I changed the stroke side at this point, and because I wasn't feathering and squaring, it wouldn't get as bad in the sound. So after that 6 week point, it flared up again. I was just infuriated again, because I was back in the boat, looking good, fitness is getting better, the right hand's good, no issues at all, and then the left one flares up. So straight away I was like, I don't know what else I can really do, and so we went back to the surgeon, and he said, I don't see how it could be as bad as that one, but he went ahead and did the operation, and it has been better, but it definitely wasn't like the leg break and like the shoulder, and that once the rehab was done, it was done and sorted. It's been an ongoing kind of niggly injury since that's never stopped me from rowing, but it's definitely had times where my thumbs and different fingers have felt funny, and compromised my probably rowing dexterity, I guess is the best way to phrase it. I think that's probably been the most challenging injury to have in terms of psychologically, because everything else felt good. My core, my fitness levels, my legs, everything was strong. Even my arms felt good and strong. It's just that they couldn't last whilst on the water when it came to swearing. So that took me out for the majority of the season. So from the start of it in October, I started bothering me, and right the way through till when was it? It was the second World Cup, when we went to Poznan, was where I managed to race.
Oh yeah, the four with Will.
With Will and Adam and Jeffers.
Jeff.
And so I felt like I was, considering I missed the whole year of rowing, I felt like I technically was rowing okay, but nothing doesn't matter how much you do in the bike, you can be really fit and really strong, but on some levels, rowing just can't get replaced at the high intensity stuff.
Yeah.
And I think I just missed too much of the year. And when it came to testing, and this was testing for the World Championships, I just was on the wrong side of top end fitness. I think I did 4 runs where I felt like I got the most out of myself. The guys I was rowing with in the Matrix said they all felt good, but ultimately I just wasn't putting enough watts down because I hadn't been rowing, and that's pretty disheartening, because you spend a whole winter, working your ass off on the bike and seeing new scores on the machine that you're measuring yourself on, and you do everything you can, and you don't get the result you want, and yeah, that's frustrating, especially going into pre-Olympic year, and you know that a lot of the boats will get most of the guys with their bums in their seats for the large part, because that's how Jürgen usually selects the team for the Olympics. So yeah, I found it hard, and still think to myself, wonder what I could have done differently, whether I should have stayed in bow side, whether if I'd stayed and sometimes I would think to myself whether we should have said do the pair rather than do the 8, and that would have meant we would have stayed in the pair for the next year, and then I would have been fine. And
Yeah.
you just wonder what if sometimes. But ultimately, I did everything I could do, and coming out the back of it, my wrists feel pretty good now. The stuff I'm doing training wise here up in Inverness, the weights I've got are big rock boulder things that require a decent bit of grip to hang on to when I'm flinging them around. So I'm definitely getting some wrist action, which I'm sure is helping the rehab. I guess I have to trust that when I get back in the boat at some point, that I've done everything I can to prepare myself for it, and I can't say for sure if I'll be fine, but I have to trust that.
Yeah. So I guess in a way, with the Olympics being postponed, it almost gives you another year, like a buffer, I guess, to sort of figure it out. And I guess during this time, technically you're resting it because you're not having to go through that feathering motion. But obviously there's a lot more miles on the ergo, which I guess is more physically demanding because you're always holding yourself to a set number. Whereas, in a boat, you're not you know roughly what the boat speed should be, but you're not sort of fixated on it. So if it's 10 seconds off, you're like, it's fine, it's a headwind or it's a crosswind, and it's more feel. But on the ergo, if you're 10 seconds off, you like kill yourself to get it back. Sort of where is acceptable, where Jürgen's not going to sort of put you in the black book. So I guess, being on the ergo every day, it is more physically demanding, but on the other side, you're not constantly like putting your wrist reflection, just sort of feathering all the time. So it could be a good chance to sort of rehab it in that regard. But then, like you say, when you do go back in the boat, what's it going to be like? But I mean, that's the same with all things, expect the DOMs, expect the aches and the pains.
Yeah.
So pray for the best.
With the surgery and the wrists, it was funny, like the prognosis in terms of recovery and whatever was told to me I could get back in the boat quite quickly. And yeah, to get back to using my hands quite quickly. But I came across, I'm not sure who it was, but it was maybe Anne Buckingham, someone I saw at Henley who knew about intersection syndrome, and I mentioned how I had it and had an operation for it, and they were like, well done for getting back to it. That you shouldn't expect to get full recovery for the best part of a year. I think that's, to be honest, hindsight, looking back at my shoulder, honestly, I don't think it was fully back to being like a normal functioning shoulder for a year. So yeah, back, I didn't race the World Championships, but I was lucky that I'd swapped sides in that year. So what would have had to be my outside shoulder and bow side was now my inside shoulder. So I wasn't doing so much work as a shoulder. I didn't need to hide much. I needed the extra, like a few months. It wasn't until it came around to the next January where I felt like it was moving how it probably should, and I was able to put this symmetrical within a certain level work through it. It was equal between both hands. So I express that to anybody who has surgery and who's watching. If you have to consider having surgery, to be patient with the initial recovery, and also accept that while you may be getting back to rowing or whatever training you're doing quite quickly, it'll probably be quite a long time until you fully get back to being full strength. And in some cases, it never gets to full strength. It'll be 90% or so, and then you've got to accept that's the level at which you're going to be striving towards. That doesn't mean you shouldn't push for extra mobility and push for it to be stronger, but there's got to be a certain level of acceptance that it will take time and it might not be as good as you might hope it to be. And that just comes with a body that at some point is not going to be unbreakable. Like everyone knows that if you damage something and if it's irreparable, then you have to deal with it. And if you're going to carry on the sport, work around it a little bit. I know you've had a few issues with your shoulder, and yeah, you still got a bronze medal at the Worlds last year, and there's lots of things. Lots of guys in the teams have niggles and things that bother them. And if you look at anybody in world sport at the top level, they tend to have something that's bothered them. There's very few people who haven't had at least a few injuries at some point in their career, and they just work around that and strengthen other aspects of their game or their physiology to kind of counteract it.
Yeah, I guess it's like do everything you can to minimize the risk of getting injured, but understand and expect that at some point it will probably happen. And then when that does happen, understand that you need to give your body the time to recover, and you need to be smart and not rush it, because by rushing it, you could make it worse and you could prolong it. So, you know, as soon as you get injured, seek the best advice, figure out a game plan, set up some structure, and try and stick to it, even when sort of you have those plateaus and you're no longer performing at the level you want, or you're achy and you're tired and you're sore, or you're off your head on anti-inflammatories, or you know, whatever it may be. Just understand that, you know, do what you can to prevent it, but sooner or later it might happen. And if it does, like, understand that it can take longer than expected to sort of come back. But if you are smart and you don't rush it, you know, some areas could come back fitter and stronger, but likelihood that area that was originally damaged probably won't be 100%, and sort of, I guess, learn to be all right with that, because there are workarounds. And, you know, if that then becomes a weakness, then your body will naturally adapt to sort of help you out with that. And so other areas will get fitter and stronger to, I guess, help offload that area.
Yeah. But even the team, like there's so many guys in the team that have, in my time being there, have overcome some pretty impressive injuries off the bat. I think of Stu Innes, my Paris partner, who's basically spent the whole this Olympiad injured and struggling with a hamstring issue, and he battled it hard initially. Then he had to take time out, and then he had to miss all world championships, and he got through all of it because he had a kind of a long-term goal being Olympics, and I hope he still does. Despite this postponement, but he got back to rowing, and we were in the team. He went from being someone very much outside the team, got his funding dropped, and it was an injury that a lot of doctors were saying to him that he wouldn't recover from. He had serious consequences of his long-term ability to walk and run and general mobility. So people like that will overcome them, and there'll be fragilities with their injury, but they'll have strengthened aspects of their character, because they've gone through such hardships. Like Matt Roster, another one, he spent a long time with back issues in the 2012 to 2016 Olympiad. I think even before that, and he's now not just a member of the team, but he's one of the higher performing ones. And that goes to show, like, if you have a genuine desire to make it, I'm not saying you definitely will make it, but there's no reason why you shouldn't keep aspiring to achieve it. Like I joined the team as a 26-year-old. There's a lot of guys in the team who've also joined late and joined or started rowing quite late, and it's one of the sports where the hard and the sustained graft gets you a long part of the way there. Yeah, just to kind of echo on what you just said there in the summary, the persistence and the diligence to keep on at recovering and keep on at getting back to where you want to be is what's going to reward you in the long term.
Truth. Right, well, thank you very much for your time. Hopefully everyone at home found this helpful, and hopefully it's answered a lot of questions. It's one of the most regularly asked questions. I'm sure you probably get a lot of the questions yourself through social media. So hopefully that's cleared up a lot of them and maybe enlightened people to sort of the path that you've had to overcome this whole time. It's not all plain sailing, and people do log in and see us race our World Cup and World Championship finals and think, oh, that looks nice. They don't actually know the hard graft that goes in behind it. And now, there's Alan, who's raced in all sweet boats, even the Cox pair, Cox's pair, Cox's 4, and the men's 8. And sort of along the way, you've had 3 big speed bumps to get over. And, it's not all plain sailing, but I think it's good to sort of let people know that. So thanks for your time.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. And feel free to ask any other questions if anyone wants to have more details. I know one of the questions that I've had most often is actually people asking specifically about the surgeries I've had. So folk who have had wrist issues or folk who have had to go in to get shoulder stuff. If anyone wants to inquire as to how I got through that or have any details on it, just feel free to get in touch.
You might regret that, but I'll pass your details on.